Elena Petrov stood at the edge of the crowded bus station in Kharkiv, her fingers gripping the handle of a weathered leather suitcase that had seen better days. The air was heavy with exhaust and the faint scent of roasted chestnuts from a vendor nearby. Her heart beat unsteadily, not from fear exactly, but from that dull ache of uncertainty that had followed her for the past 6 months. She was 43 years old, though most people told her she looked younger when she smiled. These days, she rarely smiled. Life, she thought, had a cruel way of reminding her of the years that had slipped by while she was busy being everything to everyone, except herself. She had once been a teacher, then a caretaker for her ailing mother, then a woman left alone when her ex-husband decided he wanted a younger wife and a newer life in Prague. The house they had shared had been sold, the proceeds divided, and Elena was left with just enough money to last a few months, if she was careful. It was her friend Irina who had introduced her to the idea of international marriage agencies. "You're still beautiful," Irina had said, tapping her cheek with a knowing grin. "Men in America or Canada, they love women like you. Strong, kind, mature. You just need to give them a chance to find you." Elena had laughed at first. The thought of being a mail-order bride sounded like something from a sad movie. But as the winter deepened and her savings dwindled, she began to wonder if perhaps Irina was right. Maybe love, or at least stability, could be found in the most unlikely of ways. The man's name was Richard Harlan. He was 52, a widower from Montana who had lost his wife 5 years earlier to breast cancer. His letters had been kind, thoughtful, full of questions about her life, her favorite books, her dreams. He had sent her photographs of his home, a sprawling ranch surrounded by mountains that seemed to scrape the sky. He wrote about how lonely the nights had become, how he missed having someone to share a meal with, to talk to before sleep. There was something tender in his tone, something that made Elena feel seen again. When he invited her to come to the United States, she hesitated, but only briefly. What did she have left to lose? She sold her mother's furniture, applied for a visa, and prepared herself to start anew. The flight to Montana was long and exhausting, her thoughts a carousel of hope and doubt. She rehearsed English phrases under her breath, smiling politely to strangers, imagining how it would feel to step into Richard's arms at the airport. She pictured the look on his face when he saw her, the beginning of something gentle and real. When the plane finally landed, she straightened her dress, checked her reflection in the small mirror of her compact, and whispered a prayer. But the moment she walked through the arrival gate and spotted him, tall, broad-shouldered, with a serious expression and thinning gray hair, she knew something had changed. His smile faltered when he saw her. It was subtle, but unmistakable. He waved awkwardly, his movements stiff. They exchanged polite words, but his eyes didn't light up the way they had in his letters. Over dinner at a small diner near the airport, he seemed distracted. He asked her questions she had already answered in her emails, as if trying to find something to latch onto that would reignite his earlier enthusiasm. When she laughed softly at one of his jokes, he gave a polite smile but didn't join her laughter. By the time they reached his truck, silence had grown between them like a living thing. The ride to his ranch was long and quiet. The scenery outside was breathtaking. Rolling hills dusted with snow, a sky so wide it made her feel small, but she could feel the heaviness in the air. Between them, he kept both hands on the steering wheel, occasionally clearing his throat as if to speak, then saying nothing. When they arrived, the ranch was everything he had described and more. Vast, peaceful, surrounded by the soft murmur of wind through pine trees. He helped her carry her suitcase inside, then excused himself to feed the horses, leaving her alone in the living room. The next morning, Richard told her he thought they should take things slow. There was a weariness in his voice, something unsaid lurking behind his words. She tried to make herself useful, helping in the kitchen, feeding the animals, tidying up, but he remained distant. One evening, after dinner, he sat across from her and spoke the words she had sensed were coming. "Elena, I think you're a wonderful woman," he said, his gaze fixed on the table, "but I'm not sure I'm ready for this. You're older than I imagined. I don't know, I guess I thought it would feel different." The word struck her like a blow to the chest. Older than he imagined. As if her years, her quiet strength, her laughter, all of it could be measured against some imagined ideal she could never match. She nodded, holding her composure, though her heart was breaking. "I understand," she said softly. Sometimes we don't know what we truly want until we see it. He looked at her with something like guilt in his eyes, but he didn't stop her when she packed her things the next morning. She left the ranch without a clear plan, only a small envelope of cash he insisted she take for her flight home. But she couldn't bear the thought of returning to Ukraine so soon, a failure in every sense. So she took a bus to a nearby town, a small, quiet place with a diner, a gas station, and not much else, and checked into a modest motel. For the first few days, she barely left her room. She ate crackers and drank tea, staring out the window at the snow-covered street. The world outside seemed too large, too indifferent. What had she been thinking, chasing a dream that was never meant for her? She was too old, too late, too tired of starting over. Yet as the days passed, a small voice inside her whispered that she couldn't stay hidden forever. She had come this far. Maybe she owed herself one more chance to find meaning here, even if love was not part of the bargain. On the fourth morning, she ventured out. The air was crisp, her breath visible in the cold. She found the local diner, a cozy place called the Rusty Spoon, and took a seat by the window. The waitress, a cheerful woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair, welcomed her warmly and brought her coffee. As Elena sipped it, she felt the tension in her chest begin to ease. She didn't notice the man watching her from across the room. His name was Daniel Brooks, though everyone in town called him Dan. He owned the small hardware store down the street, a family business that had been passed down through 3 generations. He was 46, with a face that carried the marks of sun and wind, eyes the color of storm clouds, and a quiet manner that drew people in without effort. He had noticed Elena the moment she walked in, the way she moved, careful and graceful, as if still half afraid the world might reject her. Something about her stirred him. He didn't speak to her that first day. He simply watched as she ate her breakfast, thanked the waitress, and left a small tip on the table. But when she returned the next morning, and then the morning after that, he decided to introduce himself. He approached her table with a hesitant smile. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, his voice deep but gentle. She looked up, startled, then returned his smile. "No," she replied. "I'm from Ukraine." The accent softened her words, turning them melodic. "Ukraine," he repeated thoughtfully. "That's a long way from Montana." They spoke for nearly an hour that morning. About small things at first, weather, the quiet beauty of the town, how different life was here compared to where she came from. He told her about his store, how he had taken it over after his father passed. She told him she had once been a teacher, that she loved books and music and the way snow made everything look clean and new. When she laughed, he thought it was the most beautiful sound he had heard in years. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed often. Sometimes she would stop by his shop, pretending to browse while they chatted about nothing and everything. Other times he would join her at the diner, bringing her stories about the town's quirks and characters. He never asked too many questions about her past, and she never volunteered more than she wanted to share. There was a quiet understanding between them, an unspoken agreement that they were both healing from something, and that perhaps healing was easier when done together. Winter melted slowly into spring. The snow gave way to soft rains, and the air began to carry the scent of pine and earth. Elena found small work helping at the diner, cleaning tables and serving coffee. She was grateful for the routine, the sense of belonging that had been missing for so long. Dan would visit often, bringing her small gifts, a jar of honey, a bouquet of wildflowers, once even a book of poems. Each gesture felt like sunlight seeping into the cold corners of her heart. One evening, after closing time, she found him waiting outside. "Walk with me?" he asked. They wandered through the quiet streets, their breath visible in the cool air. "I heard you're thinking of going back home," he said after a while. She nodded. "I don't know what home means anymore," she admitted. "The place I came from doesn't feel like mine, and the one I came to didn't want me." He stopped walking then, turning to face her. "Maybe you just haven't found the right place yet," he said softly. "Sometimes it's not a place at all. Sometimes it's a person." Something in his eyes held her still. She looked away, afraid of what she might see if she didn't. But when he reached out and gently took her hand, she didn't pull away. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt something stir inside her that wasn't sorrow. It was warmth, fragile but real. That night, as she lay in her motel room, she thought of the word too. Too old, too late, too much. The words Richard had left her with. But now, they didn't feel so heavy. Maybe she wasn't too anything. Maybe she was exactly where she needed to be.